them just right, ladies. I worked on a television show called Leverage in Portland, Oregon last year. While I was there, I went to a huge, awesome indie bookstore called Powell's with my friend John. In addition to creating Leverage, John co-wrote the 4th edition manual of the Planes. He wrote the first draft of Transformers, the good one. And he is yet another high-profile member of what he and I affectionately call the Geek Tribe. We went to Powell's specifically to look through their D&D books. And as we did, I had a mild epiphany. I just realized why these books and these games are so important to me. During a childhood that was completely abnormal, filled with things that I didn't choose for myself, these games were something I did choose to read and to play. These games were part of my world. John looked at me and he said, "Oh, so you were like every other kid who played D&D." It's funny now because it's true. But in the early 80s, I didn't have the internet or PAX to let me know that it wasn't weird or stupid that I carried character sheets with me everywhere I went. You know, just in case I needed them. Or that I imagined that the aisles in the grocery store were actually dungeon corridors, filled with traps and deadly pools of hot lava that required careful navigation using only certain floor tiles. Now that I think about it, it's pretty remarkable that my mom got any shopping done on account of the hot lava that was everywhere. And who builds a grocery store on top of a volcano? Same guy who put the river of molten lava down the middle of our street. Just in case it's anonymous, my Aunt Val was right. I loved community. That red box with the Keep on the Borderlands inside was the trailhead of the path that led me right here today. It rewarded me and countless other shy, awkward kids like me for daring to imagine. It gave an entire generation of gamers access to countless fantastic worlds that were so amazing we never wanted to leave. And some really lucky guys like Chris Pramis, Monty Cook, Andy Collins, James Wyatt, they never had to. When the Caves of Chaos were finally fully explored and all of my other adventures were over, the real world that I returned to was a pretty miserable place for a kid like me. To this day, I still get twitchy when I hear someone bouncing a dodgeball. But the early 80s really did have something going for them to balance out all the Cold War hysteria and members-only jackets. It was the golden age of video arcades. When I couldn't find a way to get a break from Reagan's World in a D&D game, I did it one quarter at a time in the arcade. The more immersive the game, the better. I was never a huge fan of Battlezone's gameplay, but it remains the closest I've ever come to actually driving a tank, even if I never made it all the way to the mountains to explore that cool volcano. I always favored the sit-down versions of games like Pole Position and Spy Hunter, because they felt more real to me than their stand-up brothers, providing a cleaner escape from the kids at Pinball Plus who took pitiless joy in pointing out that my shoes were tracks from Kmart, not authentic slip-on Vans. Hey, at least I'm not wearing a members-only jacket, you tools. While game designers and arcade owners did everything they could with cabinet systems and sound design, it was my imagination that did most of the heavy lifting when it came to filling in those games' alternate reality. In fact, I defy anyone who played it to tell me that they didn't want their slush puppies shaken, not stirred, after a particularly rousing round of Spy Hunter, with the Peter Gunn theme blasting behind their heads, your foot jammed down on the gas pedal, machine machine guns blazing while the wind blew through your perfectly feathered hair? This is something that my kids have never had to do. Their immersive narrative gaming experiences are the space shuttle to my paper airplane. When my son Nolan was 17, I showed him some of the classic Infocom games that I loved when I was his age. After growing up in a world where our Xbox 360 is more powerful than every console and computer I owned in my childhood combined, he was unimpressed. This is what gaming was like for you? This is what you did for fun? I was a little sad. As you can imagine, a little piece of me died inside. But I can't blame him for not understanding why the lurking horror scared me as much as Silent Hill or Dead Space. After all, when I was his age, I could only dream of one day putting myself into a living, breathing world like Liberty City or Rapture, where my imagination could focus on bringing the story to life because the world was already there. I love it when he and I visit those places together in a game, and he can take them completely for granted because I remember what it was like before. The earliest console video games didn't just encourage us to use our imaginations when we played them, they forced us to. I mean, when I was 9, I cared as much about the little yellow square that was my guy in Adventure as I cared about Aelfell when we played D&D last year. I guess it's a pretty good thing that Courtney 8-bit acid kicks in Adventure, right? Right, Chris Perkins, can you hear me? Pretty good thing it wasn't a multiplayer game, right, Scott Kurtz? I kid because I'm bitter. In my lifetime, don't metagame. In my lifetime, I have had a front row seat as video games have advanced from Pitfall to Portal. And while gameplay and graphics have changed, the fundamental experience of using our imagination to fill in the gaps remains the same. I mean, think about Portal for a second. After the first time you play it, you can get through the game in less than 90 minutes. You never hear another character speak except for GLaDOS and the turrets. And the only other thing you interact with is the waiting companion. I know, let's have a moment of silence. But the world that we see is so beautifully realized and so compelling that we know there is something going on outside of aperture science. Because our imagination does what it must, because it can. When you play a game, any game, you are using your imagination to bring a world to life. And that is truly special. Because while all destruction is essentially the same, when you create something, it is different every time. When you create something together, you are building bonds with your fellow gamers that could last your entire lives. The Venn diagram of my best friends, my gaming group, and people from high school who I still want to hang out with is one perfect circle. I suspect that that may be true for many other gamers of my generation. And I know that my kids will be saying the same thing in 20 years about people they've never met face to face, but interact with every day in an online game that will make Call of Duty then look like Pong looks today. Some of those worlds that we jointly create are as complex as the ones you find in an MMO, while others aren't much bigger than a Halo or Modern Warfare map. But they exist because we choose to visit them. We make these worlds real, even if it's only temporary. One of my favorite worlds to create